April 1945, Okinawa. A squadron of torpedo bombers lifts off from the USS Bunker Hill, heading into one of the bloodiest battles of World War II. Among the crews are men who've flown dozens of missions together, men who trust each other with their lives. One of those rear gunner seats should have been occupied by a 20-year-old kid from Ohio named Paul Newman, but it wasn't, because 3 days earlier, a strange, random, mundane thing happened that kept him out of the action. And without it, Paul Newman would have just been another name on a wall, another 20-year-old who never got the chance to become anything, because that day, Newman's entire unit was wiped out. Every single plane, every single man. This is the story of how one of Hollywood's greatest legends almost never existed at all, and how he spent the rest of his life carrying the weight of surviving when no one else did. Newman was 17 when Pearl Harbor happened, and like millions of other American boys, he couldn't wait to enlist. He enrolled in the Navy's V-12 program at Ohio University, dreaming of flight school, imagining himself in the cockpit of a fighter plane. He had the grades, he had the determination, he had everything he needed, except one thing. The Navy discovered Newman was colorblind, not severely, but enough to fail the vision requirements for pilots. Instead, they made him a radio man and rear gunner, not the glamorous job or the hero role. He was the guy in the back of the plane, manning a single machine gun, completely exposed to enemy fire, with almost no protection. And not just any plane. They assigned him to TBM Avenger torpedo bombers in the Pacific Theater. If you know anything about World War II aviation, you just felt a chill go down your spine, because torpedo bombers were flying death traps. Newman thought failing the color blindness test was the worst thing that could happen to him. He had no idea it might have just saved his life. Let me explain what Newman's job actually was, because most people don't understand how insanely dangerous torpedo bombers were. The TBM Avenger was a 3-man aircraft: pilot, turret gunner, and radio man, rear gunner. That was Newman's position, crouched in the back of the plane with a single .30 caliber machine gun, responsible for protecting the aircraft from enemy fighters coming from behind. Here's the thing, torpedo bombers had to fly low, really low, like 100 feet above the water, and slow, about 115 miles per hour at attack speed. You had to get close to enemy ships to launch your torpedo, which meant flying straight toward massive warships that were shooting everything they had at you. Imagine this, you're in a slow-moving plane, barely above the waves, flying in a straight line toward a Japanese battleship or carrier. Every anti-aircraft gun on that ship is firing at you. The sky is filled with flak. Shells are exploding all around you, and you can't dodge, you can't climb, you can't do anything except keep flying straight until you're close enough to drop your torpedo. The casualty rates for torpedo bomber crews were absolutely brutal. In some engagements, like the Battle of Midway, entire squadrons were annihilated. 41 planes launched, only 6 returned. It was arguably more dangerous than being a fighter pilot. And Newman, he was in the most exposed position on the plane. The rear gunner sat in a small compartment with limited visibility, completely vulnerable to fighters attacking from below or behind. If a Zero got on your tail, you were the only thing between that fighter and your crew. You'd better be a damn good shot. By early 1945, Newman was deployed to the Pacific, flying missions in support of the island-hopping campaign. The Navy was pushing toward Japan, and every mile closer meant fiercer resistance. The Japanese were getting desperate, which made them even more dangerous. And then came Okinawa, the last major battle before the planned invasion of mainland Japan. The Japanese knew it. They threw everything they had at it: kamikaze attacks, massive naval resistance, brutal air combat. Newman's squadron was being prepared for Okinawa operations. This was going to be the big one, the bloodiest one. April 1945. Newman and his crew were preparing for a series of missions supporting the Okinawa invasion. They'd flown together for months. They knew each other's rhythms, trusted each other completely. The pilot, the turret gunner, Newman in the back. Just another set of missions. Dangerous, yes, but they'd survived this long. You start to feel like maybe you're lucky, maybe you're good enough to make it through. 3 days before their scheduled missions, Newman's pilot developed an ear infection. Nothing dramatic, not even particularly serious, just an infection that caused pressure problems, the kind of thing that, at altitude, could rupture an eardrum or cause excruciating pain. The flight surgeon grounded him, simple as that. Can't fly with an ear infection, which meant the crew couldn't fly. They needed their pilot, so Newman sat on the carrier deck, watching other planes take off, probably frustrated as hell. Maybe he was angry. Maybe he felt like he was letting people down. Maybe he was relieved. Who knows? The missions went ahead without them. Newman's unit, the guys he'd trained with, flown with, probably joked with over bad carrier food, they all went. Business as usual. Target the Japanese positions supporting Okinawa. Suppress their air defenses. Standard operation. And then the waiting. That horrible waiting when planes are due back and you're counting minutes, scanning the horizon, listening for engines. The news came in pieces. A mission gone wrong. Heavy casualties. Then the full picture emerged. Newman's entire unit had been wiped out. Every plane shot down or crashed. Every man killed. The pilots he knew, the gunners he'd trained alongside, all gone. And Paul Newman was alive because 3 days earlier, his pilot got an ear infection. Not because of skill, not because of heroism, not because he made a smart decision or was particularly good at his job. An ear infection. There's a particular kind of guilt that comes with surviving when everyone around you dies. It's not rational. Newman didn't do anything wrong, didn't abandon his crew, didn't shirk duty. But rationality doesn't matter when you're 20 years old and everyone you flew with is dead. Newman rarely talked about the war, not in the celebratory war stories way that some veterans did. When asked, he'd mention he served, mention the Pacific, and then change the subject. There was nothing to celebrate about being alive because of random luck. He threw himself into acting after the war, studying at the Actors Studio under Lee Strasberg. Maybe it was a way to process what he'd experienced. Maybe it was a way to become someone else for a while. Or maybe he just needed to do something meaningful with the life he still had. When fame came, and it came big, Newman never seemed entirely comfortable with it. There was always a groundedness to him, a humility that stood out in Hollywood. He knew something most people didn't, how easily it all could have been nothing. Later in life, Newman became known for his philanthropy. Newman's Own, the food company he started, donated all its profits, over $600 million, to charity. He created camps for seriously ill children. He gave and gave and gave. Some people who knew him believed it was connected to the war, to surviving when he shouldn't have, like he was paying a debt to the universe, like he had to justify being alive when all those other men just as worthy, just as young, just as full of potential, never got the chance. He lived with it for 83 years. The knowledge that he was on borrowed time, that an ear infection, something so random, so meaningless, had changed everything. Think about the alternate timeline for a second. The pilot doesn't get an ear infection, or he gets it a week later, or the flight surgeon clears him anyway. Newman flies that mission with his unit. Paul Newman dies at 20 years old. Just another name on a memorial wall in Ohio. Maybe his parents get a folded flag. Maybe there's a brief article in the local paper. Local boy killed in action. No Cool Hand Luke. No Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid. No The Hustler. No Color of Money. No Newman's Own. No camps for sick children. All of it. Every moment of joy his work brought to millions of people. Every dollar donated to charity. Every life touched. None of it happens. And here's the thing that should haunt you. How many other Paul Newmans died that day? How many 20-year-olds with that same potential never got the chance to discover it? How many writers, artists, scientists, leaders, teachers? How much human potential was just erased because someone was in the wrong plane on the wrong day? Newman knew this. He lived every day knowing he was the exception, not the rule, that he got lucky in the most arbitrary way possible, that his survival had nothing to do with being special or deserving. An ear infection, that's what gave the world Paul Newman. 3 millimeters of inflamed tissue in a pilot's inner ear changed the entire trajectory of cinema, philanthropy, and countless lives. Paul Newman died in 2008 at age 83, 68 years after he should have died at 20. He used every one of those borrowed years, made them count, gave them meaning. Maybe that's all any of us can do with our time here. However we get it, however random the circumstances. Live like you're on borrowed time, because in a way, we all are.